Defender clearly divides all people into two camps, those who love him and those who hate him. However, one more stereotypical statement can be hung on it. It's not yours if it's not yours, and remind him of oil stains, an eternal aluminum body, finger-thick axle shafts, clutch replacement every 30,000 kilometers, the inability to get a job driving a man of proportional physique. The list of his shortcomings is twice the list of advantages. Appropriate in the 50s, Defender became an anachronism by the 80s and a unique in the 21st century. The planet tolerated this tramp to the last, and only at the age of 67 sent him into retirement. Well, nothing, Defender would say, echoing the postman Petchkin, life is just beginning in retirement. As the hero of today's article, I chose the Land Rover Defender, which was produced from 2007 to 2015. Earlier versions are well known, all their shortcomings and problems are described, all regrets and claims are expressed. In 2007, there was a modernization that so transformed the use of the car that it became possible to talk about the new Defender. The most important innovation was a new power unit with a 4-cylinder diesel engine and a 6-speed transmission. Interior transformations are also worthy of being called the most important, but, in my opinion, the engine is more important. The new engine had 3, no, even 4 advantages. This is a well-known commercial engine that has driven more than 1 million kilometers on transit minibuses. Its brains are installed as high as possible, and almost all electrics with electronics are perfectly insulated from moisture. It is equipped with an anti-stall system that raises the engine speed with increasing load. This has radically changed the Defender's behavior on rough terrain and, accordingly, its off-road driving style. The diesel engine is short and shifted to the engine shield, which had a positive effect on the weight distribution along the axis, especially the short wheelbase version. You can also add that the motor is easily chipped, and there are not so many unique spare parts. The frequency of maintenance is 15,000 kilometers. The main drawback is the generator located too low. Less scary, but unpleasant, is the use of 16-valve technology, because of which, coupled with the turbo lag, the engine pulls badly from idle. Under load, it would completely stall, but anti-stall helps. At the very beginning of the release, owners and journalists drew attention to the likelihood of contact between the cardan cross and the crankcase cover in left-hand drive versions. This was due to the increased crosspieces of the new shafts and a higher motor. The shape of the lid was changed almost immediately, and henceforth this problem was not. The real problem with this was the EGR valve, which often cokes, and replacing it costs about 10,000 rubles. If you do not take the air intake to the roof and often drive through dust and dirt, you can get to replace the mass airflow sensor, which costs about 3,500 rubles. In 2012, the engine was unexpectedly replaced with the 2.2-liter ZSD 422 of the same power and thrust. His name also remained the same, Puma. The diesel engine was designed by the joint efforts of mechanics from several companies and finalized at Land Rover. Actually, this is the same Duratorque 2.4, only of a smaller volume and fitted for Euro 5. This is not the same engine that was installed on the Freelander 2 and is descended from the Peugeot DW12. Serial problems with the Puma 2.2 engine have not yet been noticed. Freezing of the crankcase breather, which happened on other cars, almost never occurred on the Defender due to the organization of the unit heating. The main thing is that the anti-stall system remained with the new motor. He needs it, because the thrust from below is even worse for him than for the previous one, despite equal other indicators. Land Rover is justifiably proud to have the largest underdrive ratio in its SUVs. The transfer case, which was installed on the 2007 to 2015 Defender, originates from the one that appeared back in 1987. Simple, reliable, and heavy, like a cast-iron bridge. Its repair with removal in the field turns into a fair amount of strength gymnastics. The drive, as we know, is permanent all-wheel drive with the force locking of the center differential. Typical problems: leaking oil seals, worn washers of the axles of the differential satellites. User problems are expressed in the fact that sometimes it is difficult to turn on the gear due to the gear teeth resting against each other. Sometimes the lock does not turn off. Everything is solved by holding the handle in the desired position in a slow movement in an arc or, on the contrary, when setting the wheels straight. The main box in 2007 became a 6-speed. This is both good and bad. It's bad because the box was not designed directly for the Defender, but was taken from commercial vehicles, and the unloaded car twitches when shifting during acceleration. The first gear is too short. Starting from the second one is not easy, and it's easier to sentence the clutch. By the way, if you start off exactly as taught in the Land Rover Experience courses, then there will be no jerk and the clutch will last longer. In the meantime, it is this that is the most frequent reason for contacting the service. The first sign of a malfunction is a knock in neutral immediately after starting the engine. The noise goes away when the clutch pedal is depressed. Often you have to change not only the disc, about 5,000 rubles, but also the basket, which costs 15,000 rubles per circle with work. By the way, if you are offered to change the flywheel as well, which will raise the cost of repairs immediately by a dozen, refuse. This flywheel is single mass and, according to authorities, is practically eternal. In 1983, when Land Rover released the first spring-loaded 110, farmers and expeditioners staged a riot in Maidan, demanding the return of the springs. Why? A broken spring can be forged in any corner of Chestershire or Namibia, and the spring has to be changed. Of course, they are right. Every 80,000 to 100,000 kilometers the springs need to be replaced. There are breakdowns, but the increased quality of the metal allows us to recall with a smile the righteous anger of the orthodox Land Rovers. Besides, the articulation of bridges with springs is simply excellent. Stabilizers, which are still needed in the era of high speeds, somewhat blurred the picture of triumph, but competitors are far from that. The same can be said about the suspension arms, strong and hardy. But the responsibility for the resource of rubber metal products lies entirely with the owner and his driving style. The front silent blocks of the rear levers and the rear shock absorbers fail the fastest. They must be carefully inspected at each MOT. The handling of a bridge car at high speeds is highly dependent on the condition of the rear suspension. If a broken front always makes itself felt, then a leaky shock absorber can play a bad joke once, but at the most unfavorable moment, say, while overtaking on a highway or when it hits an asphalt rut. Fortunately, both rubber bands and shock absorbers are not too expensive, and replacement is not difficult. Producers of the sea, you can choose. The mentioned silent blocks, or, as they are also called, rear thrust cushions, can be found for 1,000 and a little rubles, but there are so many shock absorbers and their prices are so different that your eyes run wide. The notorious left rear axle shaft, which in the folklore of definitists has become almost an expendable part, costs about 3,500 rubles. For the original. However, the authorities say that if it came to replacing the axle shafts or differentials, it's easier to splurge on reinforced ones, although then the cardans will howl, and there it's not far from the transfer case. In a word, it's up to you, and I advise you to listen to the manufacturer. He has more experience all experts combined. In addition to the fact that you have to sit down behind the wheel, there is practically nothing to say about the Defender's interior. If you are uncomfortable because you are tall, change the steering wheel to a smaller one, set the seat to your taste and with more longitudinal cushion adjustment. I just raised the leading edge, substituting the washers under the sled mount and calmly drove under 1,000 kilometers in a day. There are few problems in the cabin. The air conditioner works great. At the same time, no matter how much the heating system is modernized, it cannot even be called a good language. It blows high in the legs, and only on one leg. The rear passengers are always cold, and in a traffic jam, the efficiency drops until the windows freeze. 2 autonomous heaters help, one for the engine, the second for the passenger compartment with air ducts leading to the second row. The contacts of the steering column light switch often burn out, especially if you imprudently put more power bulbs. A new switch costs 800 rubles. Sometimes the alarm button Pogliukavite. The quality of sliding seals stopped massively complaining only after 2012. However, in terms of isolation from dust, water, and dirt, the Defender is no better than the UAZ 469, to be honest. In a word, you can live, but even more so to fight off-road. If you pay attention to the price dynamics of used Defenders, you will be surprised to see that this hard worker sometimes costs not much less than the same age Range Rover, although the price was 3 times different at the first sale. There are few cars in the world that lose so little in price, and finding a Defender cheaper than $20,000 is almost impossible. However, with the change in the exchange rate, the conjuncture also changed. In any case, the buyer must accurately understand what and why he is buying. I don't say why. Why is not the question. After all, this is Defender, and he is the only one.